All right. Go ahead, Steve.
All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Saturday morning training with, Jeremy doing one of his fantastic trainings. A lot of people probably will not be on the call this morning, Jeremy, especially a lot of people that are tied to Utah, because yesterday was our July 24th a Pioneer Day celebrations. It's actually a state holiday. There's no mail delivery or anything. It's, very, people celebrate it. Fireworks, everything. It's just like July 4th, 3 weeks later, it feels like. And a lot of people take advantage of that holiday to go out of town. So there may be a fewer number of people on the call today, but doesn't matter. Everyone is so excited about the calls that you do, and we learn so much on them. We appreciate you very much, Jerem. So what have you got for us this morning, brother?
All right. No, thanks everybody for jumping on. And, in that spirit of pioneers, right? That's kind of who we are. We're in the beginning of something that is going to become, very popular and praiseworthy and I think a household name. But in the beginning, it's not easy, right? Being a pioneer, you take those arrows, you deal with the heat and the cold and the lack of water and all the things, right? The snakes and whatever. But the point is, you get to be first. And those that came and settled the West basically, and it wasn't just Utah. It went on to California and the gold rush and all of that stuff. So there's a lesson to be learned with that, right? Those that arrived first, they were the ones that settled it, and they then were the owners, right? We like that phrase of being a digital landlord. And that's what we're doing. We are staking our claim. We are the first ones in on this thing, and it's not easy in the beginning, and there's problems and issues, and things don't happen quite like you hope maybe, but in the end, it all comes together, and more people come, and those that were in first usually have the advantage, right? So thanks for being pioneers, all of you. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and share today's training, which is all about the Gnodi Constitution, or the Gnodi Charter is the other way to name that. And it's really fascinating to be part of something that is going to be a household name, right? And so, can you let me know are you guys seeing that? I'm not.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
we
cool.
got it.
It didn't pop up on my end, so I wasn't sure. So, all right, cool. So now that we're seeing what I'm sharing here, so we're going to look at the Gnodi Charter. Now, I like to compare this to, how many of us have actually gone and read the United States Constitution, right? Maybe there was a chance to do that back in high school when you're taking political science class or whatever, and okay, yeah, I got to go read the Constitution, right? But I think it's very rare that most people have ever actually looked at the Constitution and even read it all the way through, even once in their life. But we know some of the basics. We know some of the ideas that are in there. And unless you're, a constitutional attorney or something, and you're trying to learn all the ins and out of it, it's too much, right? And it's just black and white and boring and whatever. And unfortunately, that's how most constitutions are. And it's not any different for our Gnodi Constitution. If you go and download the actual document and look at it, it is just black and white and long and full of stuff that, legalese and whatever. And you just go, oh my goodness, I don't understand any of this. So I tried to take that and just get the highlights and the best parts of it, and try and make it simplified for all of us today so that we can understand what is going on when we are members of the Gnodi community of the DAO, right? Our decentralized autonomous organization, which is governed by this charter, this constitution, okay? So it talks about who holds the power and how decisions get made and what protects you and all that kind of stuff, right? So first thing is what it is and what it isn't, right? So the first part of it is the controlling government's instrument. So what that means is it establishes that there is governance, right? That there is organization to this, that there's a treasury, that there's rights and there's proposals and there's voting and there's amendments, all those kinds of things, okay? But what it is not is a marketing document. Okay, where I would not recommend that if you're trying to recruit somebody into Cirrus or to buy a note or something, that you stay, hey, let's go read the Constitution together. Right? No, that would be a total turnoff. So, and it's not even the white paper, right? We talked about the white paper a few weeks ago, and that's a little bit different. The white paper, maybe a little bit you could use for some marketing for those that are curious and into that kind of thing. Yeah, white paper explains it and how the tokens are issued and all those things. So it can be, right, and it's good education, but definitely not for marketing when you're talking about a constitution. Okay. The other thing that is kind of cool is that it is supreme over every other document. So if the charter ever conflicts with the white paper or any policy or anything it says on the website, right, or anything that Bob says on one of his things, it doesn't matter. The charter, the Constitution is the law of the land, right? Just like it is for the United States, right? You go all the way up to the Supreme Court and they decide if it's constitutional or not. Same situation here. We have something that's pretty solid, right? And the supporting documents can't amend it. Okay. The other thing is that the signature block reads Guardian Council ratification TBT, right? Effective date TBT, pending ratification. So this is actually just the draft version 3.2. So it still needs to be ratified. And not sure when that's going to happen. It doesn't say when it's going to be happen. We haven't heard, but it's a framework as drafted pending final ratification. So at some point, I'm assuming that we will go in and we will all get to vote, right? We will all get to say, yep, we ratify this, we vote for it, we approve it, and then it's set in stone. Okay. So where every document ranks, right? So here's kind of how you can see it. So you look at the charter, which is the Constitution. It is the supreme. It can only be changed by 75% constitutional amendment. Okay. So just like the United States Constitution, it's pretty set in stone, and it takes a lot of work to get an amendment done. Okay. So that's good. And you can think of that as, hey, yeah, that protects us, right? That's actually a good thing in the long run. Okay, then after that, you've got your white papers, which includes the light paper, which is what we talked about 2 weeks ago, explanatory, strategic, and it's all subordinate to the charter. And those are definitely more fluid. Okay, the light paper can be modified and updated per the legal counsel and everything. So that's great, and those and that's good because those need to be a little bit more flexible. Right. And then you have supporting documents. So we got the treasury policy, code of conduct, template, service agreements, all that kind of stuff. But all of those have to be in agreement with the charter in the first place. Okay. Now, there are 4 definitions that can kill any kind of misconceptions, right? So the first thing, super important to understand, is that Gnodi, the blockchain and all that, is not a company. Okay. The Gnodi blockchain is the network, it's a protocol, it's a governance framework, but it's not a single company or app or council or foundation or even person, right? So very important to understand when we talk about decentralized autonomous organization, that's what it means. It's decentralized, it's autonomous. There is not anything other than the Constitution that's controlling it, okay? The other thing is that decentralized autonomous organization, the DAO, is not the blockchain, right? They're not synonymous. The DAO is now the governance body of eligible voters. All of us we are what make up that DAO, and it's a mechanism, but it's not the chain itself, right? The chain or the blockchain is the technology. Okay, that's the underlying infrastructure. And then we as members, we are the DAO. Okay, then you have the treasury. So the treasury is not the same thing as the admin's money. Okay, so because we have a council of guardians, right, and those part of the Constitution and everything, and that so the money coming into treasury, it doesn't mean that those guys can just go spend it, right, willy-nilly. No, the assets are held for the ecosystem, okay, and it's a service provider administering it that gains zero ownership of it. Okay, so that's important to understand too. So it's it's not like somebody could just take the money and run, right? Unfortunately, we've probably all been part of organizations, things where that's happened, right? Where money comes in and they misspend it, and then they take off and go to another country or something with your money. No, that can't happen because it's not something that one single person or a couple of people have control over. Okay, and then the other important thing to understand is that the DRP, those digital reward points, are not the same thing as the tokens. Okay, so when it comes to the accounting and scoring units for rewards, right, that is the DRP. Those are digital reward points. So they're not node tokens. Okay, they're not currency. They're not transferable. Any of that. So they're just points. And then we have that choice to go in and convert those points into tokens if we want to, right? So in your wallet, you have that option to deposit, or you can set it to auto deposit if you want. And so it just automatically does it. But that's not they're not the same thing, right? You're not just automatically getting tokens right from the blockchain immediately. No, we're getting digital reward points for our activities, for our participation. And then when we choose to, we can convert those and they become the token at that point. Okay, now the other thing, this is Articles 5 and 8. Okay, so this is a key thing, is that nobody has power they weren't given. So it's all about no implied authority. No participant, no node operator, validator, developer, service provider, council member can bind the Gnodi blockchain to obligations. They can't control the treasury. They can't modify protocol rules. They can't make public commitments or alter governance rights unless it's expressly authorized. So service providers, they serve. They don't own or govern, right? That's a key component. And then the other thing is participant acknowledgement. So the council may require you to sign an acknowledgement to access government rights or rewards, confirming that you've actually reviewed the charter and that you agree to it, that nobody promised you any profit, okay, any ROI or any guaranteed liquidity. And the charter may limit legal rights that you'd otherwise have. And the participation can be revoked as provided in the charter for bad actors. So if you have anybody that's not following the rules or doing stuff that they shouldn't, they can be banned. Okay, so that's important to understand. All right, so the DAO, right? This decentralized autonomous organization. What does it control? What does it stop? Well, there's reserved powers. Okay, and the DAO must approve them. So anything to do with amending the Constitution, anything to do with material changes to node voting rights, all the stuff related to tokenomics and the emission rules. Okay, if there need to be changes there, any kind of material protocol upgrades, any kind of treasury spends above the policy limits, the council appointments and removals, and major service provider engagements, right? So in other words, node class changes. So like, for example, right now, most of it's going through one-click hosting, okay? But yeah, if we decide to change from one-click hosting, that kind of stuff, right, needs to get decided on as a group. Okay, now there's limits. The DAO may not approve something like anything violating applicable law. Okay, that's very important. We can't have our Constitution go against the laws of the country and get us in trouble. We can't approve anything that unlawful confiscation of private property, right? That we really have anything we want to take from anybody, but yeah, you can't do that. Retroactively stripping vested rights without due process, fraud or misrepresentation, impairing network security without technical review, and anything conflicting with the charter unless it's done as an amendment. So in other words, I mean, a lot of this stuff is, just there to satisfy all the legal, mumbo jumbo stuff. But it's kind of cool to see that it's in there and we're protected and we know that it's not going to get manipulated. Okay, so we have a council of guardians and we have to treat them as if they were referees, not rulers. Okay, they are not the president. They are not, a dictator or some other thing. They are just referees. That's it. And so it is comprised of 5 members. So you got 5 members that are staggered on 2-year terms. Okay, about half the seats are up for election every year. So that's kind of fun, right? I'm excited to learn how to participate. If we're going to do campaigns and stuff, hey, vote for me. But the term length changes, need a constitutional amendment, right? So 2-year terms, if you want to make those a little bit longer, we could potentially do that. But as of now, the way it's set, 2-year terms, and you can, put your name in the hat, I guess, and say, hey, I want to do it, right? So that'll be fun when that comes around. What it does, well, this procedural and constitutional review of proposals, oversight of implementation, coordination of approved treasury actions, conflict of interest review, and publishing updates, that's what the Council of Guardians does. They're all involved in all of that. And what they can't do, though, is amend the charter. They can't alter, supply, or do anything with voting rights, okay? Or they can't spend any of the treasury unilaterally. They can't reject a compliant proposal just because it disagrees. And they can't be a prosecutor and a judge, right? That's not their role. So they can veto things, though. So they have a veto power, but it's protective only. Right. So the council may delay or veto solely on a reasonable finding of material harm, and they must publish the written explanation, and the DAO can't override it. Right. Like if that happened and we all said, nope, we could go in and we could vote and say, too bad. So there's, it's checks and balances. It's, set up a lot like the United States Constitution, where, you got, okay, if the president vetoes something, but then the Congress can go back, and if they get enough votes, they can override the president's veto. And right? So similar structure, similar concept, which is great. Okay. So how does an idea become a law? You got 5 steps to do it, right? So if you have, if you personally, or somebody that's way into blockchain and understands, things and wants to propose something, and hey, we should add this or we should do these things, then that can be done by following these 5 things. You can do a draft, right? An endorsement. So any node operator, any of us in good standing, okay, we draft it, but we need 5 other eligible endorsers, right? So we would team up with 5 other people that agree and say, yep, we got to do this. And then we could go ahead and submit it. Okay. Then that's step 2. So a refundable good faith proposal stake may be required for sending in a proposal. And it is forfeitable if it's malicious or just spam, right? So you don't want to play with it. so there's, to avoid just random people submitting random proposal and stuff, you gotta put up some money, right? You gotta, kind of like adding a bond to it so that, people aren't doing it just willy nilly and whatever. No, that, you gotta stake some of your Gnodi token. And and it's refundable, right? As long as nothing crazy goes on. And so, but yeah, it's kind of like paying a fee, right, to submit your proposal. Then the council will review it. Okay, so there's a procedure. They check if it matches the Constitution, if it's legal or not, if there's any risk to it, right? And then if it's approved, they'll publish that to the portal, and then that triggers a vote. So we have a community vote at that point from about 7 to 21 days. Okay. You need 15% quorum, meaning 50% of people participating in that. And then it will pass if it has 50.1% of the weighted votes that are cast, right? So that's good. And then it's implemented. So the named party executes, right? The material deviations need renewed approval, but it gets implemented at that point if it passes. If it fails, then that group or those 5 individuals or more, whoever submitted it, they can resubmit after a 30-day wait. Okay. Abstentions are recorded, but don't count as yes or no. So there we go. So pretty fun that we can all be part of this, right? We are all owners in this community. And yeah, if we have something we want to get done and we've got some backing and we want to stake some Gnodi token, then we can go ahead and see what the rest of the community thinks and get it voted on. So that's fun. Okay, so Articles 9 and 10, okay, the voting math. So 15% quorum of weighted active votes, right? 50.1% to pass some kind of proposal. And then on the Constitution, you actually need to have 75%. So that's a bigger change, right? That's because that affects so much more. And so that's why you got to have at least 75%. But the vote comes from node ownership. And so when you have a full node, you get one full vote. If you have half a node, right, you get a half a vote. A quarter node is a quarter vote. A mini node is 1/10 of a vote. So it's just cumulative. So the more nodes you own, the more votes you have, which is great. Okay. And it's all subject to active status and per proposal snapshot and all that. But we definitely have other things that are in there to protect us, like anti-manipulation rules. Okay, so there's certain attacks that come out. There's like Sybil attacks and artificial splitting and duplicate voting and fraudulent transfers and stuff like that. So they monitor all the different potential ways that things could be manipulated, just to make sure, and it's all it's programmed in there to try and mitigate any kind of fraud or manipulation. Things will get reviewed and audited and everything, just to make sure, right, that we don't have some bad actor trying to take over. But in the end, yeah, the more of a digital landlord you are, the more vote power you have, and you can go in and propose good things. So, okay. Now let's talk about the treasury. This is Article 11. So Article 11 is all about protecting the funds, right? Protecting the money. So it's always multi-signature, okay? There's never a single person that has full control of the money. And that's all for, the safeguarding, okay? Nobody, not a single council member or service provider or anybody like that has unilateral control. Admin access is not ownership. Okay. So that's very important. The other one is prohibited use, right? So we can't use, anything that's not authorized, or for personal benefit, anything that has a conflict of interest, anything that just plain unlawful, political contribution, right? That kind of stuff, or speculation outside of approved policy. Can't do it. They can't use treasury money for any of those things. And then mandatory reporting. So we got regular public reports, right? So there's, the assets held, where the disbursements went, the approved allocations, pending obligation, material risk, payments to insiders, trigger conflict of interest rules. All that stuff is mandatory. They have to report on it, and it has to be transparent. So all of us, as part of the DAO, can see what's going on. Okay. Now, Article 13, tokenomics is now constitutional law, right? Which is cool. So everything we learned from the light paper, right, from 2 weeks ago, that we have, for example, now the 29.5 billion cap, that we have that annual halving, that we've got the 40-40-10-10 pools, that we've got 500 million tokens locked in reserve. That's all now written into Article 8. Okay, with the Gnodi P4, which is what we all voted on, that vote record is now embedded. Okay, so here's who can change what. So at this point, if we ever want to raise the supply cap, or if we ever want to restore the those burn tokens that they did, right? The 5.5 billion burn tokens, or if we ever want to change the halving framework, or change the lock reserve or multipliers or anything like that, or change the symbol rule, any of those things would require a 75% amendment vote. Okay. But what the council can do without an amendment is they can change operational DRP updates and app level scoring refinements. They can do fraud control adjustments. They can do non-material implementation changes. They can do rounding and reconciliation methodologies, and they can add and remove different DRP categories, right? So different things that give us daily or digital reward points. Okay, so that's good because they need that flexibility. All right, and then there's a section this is new, okay, that wasn't in the previous one, section 13.3a, and this is about transferring. Okay, node token transfers, restrictions, and anti-concentration. So transfers are conditional, meaning that Gnodi token may not be sold, assigned, pledged, or transferred except as permitted by applicable law and approved governance policy. So transferees must meet eligibility rules, including jurisdictional restrictions. In other words, what this is saying is if somebody in North Korea decided to get a Gnodi wallet, and someone in the United States tried to send them some Gnodi token, that would be frowned upon, right? Because North Korea is on the blacklist when it comes to the United States government. And so that's kind of what that is, right? Or if you have a known terrorist, right? You got some narco guy in Mexico who's selling drugs across the border, and you try and send him Gnodi tokens, right, to support him selling drugs. Well, of course, that is going to be frowned upon, right? And so transfers are conditional. That's basically what this is saying, is that not all transfers are going to be permitted. Obviously they're not monitoring it 100%, but if it comes down to it, they look into it and audit and everything. Don't send money to drug lords, guys. Okay. Bad actors are excluded, right? So in other words, the DAO may revoke or freeze or restrict government's rights tied to Gnodi token involvement in unauthorized transfers. Okay. And then anti-concentration, that's another big one, is that no person or group acting in concert, even via multiple wallets or proxies, may hold a concentration that materially undermines decentralization. So the council may adopt wallet limits and investigation procedures if it comes to light that somebody's trying to manipulate things. Okay, so anyway, so there's some controls in there, which is great. It protects us all. Make sure that when being involved with Gnodi and the blockchain and Cirrus, that we're not going to get burned in the end, right? Okay, so conduct. This is Article 14, conduct rules and your due process rights. So we have minimum conduct standards. So we are expected to comply with all applicable laws, including local restrictions on Gnodi ownership, no collusion to rig governance, proposals, or treasury outcomes, no illegal discrimination or harassment, and civil constructive communication in all official forms. And then if we're ever accused, okay, so node revocation is a serious sanction requiring due process. They can do that. You could have a node revoked if you're doing naughty things, okay? So that is, that's a serious sanction, but you are guaranteed. So we have due process, which is awesome, okay? So you have notice of the alleged violation and the evidence, the opportunity to respond with impartial review. You have written decision and appeal process if available. An emergency suspension must be time limited and formally reviewed. Okay, so it is possible if we have a bad actor buy a node, right, and then they're using it for terrorism or something, then that node could be suspended and sanctioned, and then they go through that formal process of review. Right, they can't just turn it off because they hate you. Right, no, that won't happen. So that's good. We're all protected with due process. Okay. So disputes and conflicts of interest, right? This can happen. We know it will. So Articles 15 and 16 are all about this. It's all about that, we start out in an informal way, right? Just a good faith resolution, talk it out, try and figure out, hey, okay, what's going on? Why are you not agreeing? What are you saying? Why are you having a problem? Okay. But if they just can't come to an agreement, then there is mediation. So it will go to mediation. You got an impartial mediator, and the conflicts are disclosed and talked about, and they try and do it then with that impartial mediator. And then if that doesn't work, then you can actually go to arbitration. Okay. So you got to have, AAA rules. It's got to be in English. It may be virtual, but whatever happens in that arbitration is then final and binding, right? So courts stay available for emergency injunctions, but yeah, everything finalizes with arbitration. You can't do a class action lawsuit. We agree to the terms of going to arbitration. Okay. Then if there are any, other conflicts of interest, so then also in Article 16, anyone with material interest in a proposal, payment, contract, or sanction must disclose it before participating and may be required to recuse, right? So related party treasury payments get heightened transparency, and failure to disclose can mean removal, repayment, or sanctions. So the council can't just be the sole judge in matters where it has a stake, right? So lots of protections built in. Okay, and then of course, Article 18, changing the Constitution itself. As we mentioned, a standard amendment requires 75% of all eligible weighted votes, not just votes cast. It must identify the exact text added, deleted, or modified. It must include a plain language explanation of the purpose and effect of the change, and the updated charter published promptly, and the prior versions archived. Okay. So if there's a need for an emergency amendment, then this can only be for imminent legal, regulatory, security, or existential risk. The council must publicly declare the emergency and its basis. You still have to have 75% of the votes, but you got to have a 20% quorum, and it must be ratified by the full standard threshold within 90 days. Okay, and then and this is explicitly banned for just routine changes. Okay. All right. So here's a little bit of what you should and shouldn't say with the charter. Not that it will come up a lot, but here's the proper way to present it. So you can say governance rules are constitutional, and supply and vote weights can't change without that 75% approval, right? That's great. And that should be attractive to people to understand this stuff. You can say no single company or person controls the treasury or the protocol. That's good, right? That's what we want. We want it to be decentralized. You can say, hey, node holders have due process rights in writing. We're protected. We have all of these things to make sure that we're not going to get burned in the end. And then we have the idea of Gnodi transfers are subject to law and governance policy, right? So token, yeah. So when people say, well, that you're just using that for fraud, or you're using that to, for money laundering or whatever, you can, no, it's all subject to law and the government's policy. What we don't want to ever say is, oh yeah, you can just sell your Gnodi anytime to anyone. Not true. Okay. It's all based on, jurisdiction, bad actors, all that kind of stuff. Remember? And so if people don't like that, then hey, too bad. we need to protect ourselves, not get in trouble, and ruin it for everybody else. You never want to say, oh, I speak for Gnodi. I'm a member of the DAO, and so I've got to say, and I speak for them. They're promising, right? There's no implied authority. Okay, for being a digital landlord, you have a vote, you have a voice, but you don't speak for the whole thing. You can't ever say this guarantees profit or liquidity, right? Because we signed a statement that nobody promised that, basically. And then the council can just fix that for us, right? Like, oh, it's broken, whatever. No. Some things require a vote. Some things require an amendment. Okay. Now, we're not talking about, my tokens didn't show up yet in my wallet, right? Like that. No, technical stuff like that. That's not what we're talking about here. The council doesn't really manage that. Okay. But anything that has to do with the Constitution and policy and those things, yeah, the council can't just say, oh, yeah, let's boom, change it, right? So that's great. That's a good protection. Okay. So why does the Constitution make our story stronger? Let's pull it all together here. It answers the trust question, right? Skeptics ask, well, who controls this thing? Well, now you can point out a supreme clause, right? Supremacy clause with the Constitution, with a limited council and a 75% amendment protection, all that in writing. Okay. People want to know that this is legit. There you go. It protects the little guy. So anti-concentration limits, it limits the whales, right? We don't want the big whales coming in and, putting in $1 billion to buy all the Gnodi token, right? And ruining it for the rest of us. No, we want to make sure that, and then of course, taking over, right? Because they own all the nodes and, they have all the vote rights and stuff. No, we don't want that. We want to make sure that it's fair. Okay. And then it gives you the receipts. So governance portal records all the published treasury reports, right? All the veto explanations, archive charter versions, every claim that you make is checkable. You can go see it, right? So the pitch in one line is, hey, Gnodi doesn't ask you to trust people. It asks you to read a constitution. That's pretty cool. All right. So here's the recap. 5 things to remember. Just 5 lines. The charter beats every other document. There's no ambiguity that never expands anyone's power, right? There's voting math, very simple. 15% quorum, 50.1% standard for votes cast to pass, 75% on the Constitution if all are eligible. And then the council is a referee. It's not a dictator, okay? They don't have all the control. It's anything to do with the charter, the supply, or treasury. Stuff can be vetoed, right, for published reasons, but they can't just say this is what it is. And then for new proposal stakes, right, a possible signed participant acknowledgement and the whole transfer anti-concentration rules are there, which is great. And then, of course, node holders get written due process rights, and they can go to arbitration, so there's no chaos. So what is your income producing activity, your IPA for this week? Use the one-liner. Gnodi asks you to read a constitution, not trust people, and use that with 3 prospect conversations and invite each of them to next Saturday's meeting session. So there we go. That is the Constitution in a nutshell. What do you guys think? Comments?
Being Canadian looks pretty good.
Right? Yeah.
Hey, Vaughn's got a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
How do other constitutions look compared to this one? The other DAO?
Yeah, other types of blockchain projects and stuff.
Yeah.
Good question. Yeah, that'd be fun to do a compare and contrast kind of thing. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know.
Sounds like a lunch and learn to me.
Right? Yep.
That's
yeah,
a good question, Vaughn.
Yeah. I'll look into that. I'll see what I can find out.
This sounds like it would be outstanding compared to the ones I've heard about, but then I haven't really had the time or opportunity to study those others. I'd like to see people with more experience compare that. This sounds like so much better than whatever I've heard before.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, well, I'll look into that and let you guys know. All right. Anybody else? Comments? Questions?
I need a good attorney. Are you available?
Right?
That's good, Kurt. Hey, thanks very much, Jerem. We always appreciate you. And we do not take for granted these trainings on Saturday mornings. We learn so much. So thank you, brother.
You're welcome. All right. Well, thanks everybody for jumping on. Yeah, we'll be here next Saturday. The following Saturday on the 8th, I'm out. I'm traveling. So we're going to find out if somebody else can cover for the following. But for the next Saturday, which is the 1st, we'll be back here. Same time, same channel. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jerem.
Yeah. See ya.